In this video, I'm going to look at the worst playoff games by star quarterbacks. Admittedly, for some of these guys, the sample size is small, but then again, it's my video and I can do what I want. That's the beauty of America, baby. Enjoy. Starting off with some active quarterbacks. Tom Brady, 2009 wildcard game. It's so awesome to see Tom Brady eat shit. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's glorious. That's why I take great pleasure in talking about his 2009 playoff performance against the Ravens. He committed 4 turnovers, had a dreadful 49.1 passer rating, and got the crap kicked out of him in by far the worst playoff loss of his career. It's a shame every Tom Brady game can't go this way. Aaron Rodgers, 2014 NFC Championship. Rodgers' performance in the 2014 NFC Championship game is the worst statistical playoff loss of his career, and also the one that hurts the most. He threw for a touchdown, but also threw 2 interceptions and had a dreadful 55.8 rating. But most importantly, his offense wasn't able to take advantage of several Seattle turnovers deep in Seattle territory. Green Bay famously lost in overtime, but this should have been a blowout win for them. Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl 55. While I feel the 2021 AFC Championship game was Mahomes' biggest choke job, he at least was incredible in the first half, throwing 3 touchdowns. In Super Bowl 55, he was shut down for the entire 60 minutes, never got going, and ended up scoring just 9 points, throwing 2 interceptions and getting the crap beat out of him thanks to his overmatched offensive line. Russell Wilson, 2020 wildcard game. You could argue the 2014 NFC Championship game should be here, but he threw the game-winning touchdown in overtime, so I just couldn't do it. Instead, I went with his disappointing showing in the 2020 wildcard round versus a Rams team led by an injured Jared Goff. If not for a garbage time touchdown down 17 with a few minutes left to play, his already terrible stats would have been even worse. Good luck, Denver. Josh Allen, 2019 wildcard game. To his credit, Allen has yet to have a truly terrible playoff performance, but his first career playoff game versus Houston was his worst thus far. He caught a touchdown and ran for 92 yards, but he had so many chances to win the game in the second half and couldn't close the deal in the fourth quarter or overtime. It wasn't the worst game in the world, but it was an opportunity missed. Lamar Jackson, 2020 divisional round. Like Allen, Jackson is still very young. Unlike Allen, he is yet to play great in the playoffs, so picking his worst game was a little challenging, but I went with his 2020 outing versus Allen's Bills. Jackson's defense held an elite Bills offense to just 10 points, but Jackson could only muster 3 points. His back-breaking interception in the Bills' end zone late in the third quarter that was returned 101 yards for a pick 6 is why this gets the nod. He got hurt after that, and Baltimore ended up losing 17-3. Matthew Stafford, 2016 wildcard game. The newest Super Bowl winning quarterback rewrote his entire legacy this year in LA, but his first 12 years in Detroit, he only made the playoffs 3 times and went 0-3 in them. His worst individual performance was in 2016 versus Seattle, where he only led his offense to 6 points and had chances late in the third and early in the fourth to make it a game, but failed both times. He ended up losing by 20. Matt Ryan, 2010 divisional round. Matt Ryan's first 3 career playoff games were all terrible, but 2010 is the worst because Atlanta was the 1 seed and had home field advantage throughout the playoffs. It all came crumbling down for Ryan in this dreadful 27-point home loss to Green Bay. Ryan's defense didn't show up, but he didn't either. He committed 3 turnovers, including a brutal 70-yard pick 6 on the final play of the first half that took everything out of Atlanta. Joe Flacco, 2008 AFC Championship game. Alright, so Flacco isn't a quote-unquote star quarterback, but he's famous for his playoff career thanks to 2012. But while he's now known for his great playoff performances, he was actually really bad in the playoffs early on, and he was never worse than he was in the 2008 AFC Championship game. He had an 18.2 rating, threw 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, but worst of all, he had a chance to give Baltimore the lead late, but threw a game-clinching pick 6 instead. Nick Foles, 2018 divisional round. Much like Flacco, Foles is a mediocre quarterback who will live forever thanks to a magical playoff run. Against New Orleans in 2018, he got Philadelphia off to a 14-0 lead early, but badly sucked the rest of the game. In typical Foles fashion, he was driving the ball late for a chance to win, but he threw a game-losing interception thanks to Alshon Jeffrey having butterfingers. While that interception wasn't his fault, he still finished the game with a terrible 61.4 rating. Cam Newton, Super Bowl 50. Cam's peak was obviously 2015 when he won MVP. That's also when he had his worst playoff game, Super Bowl 50. Some might disagree because that Denver defense was legendary, but hey, life isn't fair. Cam wasn't quite as bad as his stats say, but his stats were still pretty bad. 3 turnovers, 6 sacks taken, and a 55.4 rating. He led his offense to just 10 points on 14 drives, including 2 drives that fizzled out in the fourth quarter with a chance to take the lead. No bueno. Now, on to the retired quarterbacks. Peyton Manning, 2003 AFC Championship game. Peyton Manning famously had an up-and-down playoff career with many underwhelming performances, but to me, his worst will always be the 2003 AFC Championship game against New England. He threw 4 interceptions and had a 35.5 passer passer rating. He looked flustered the entire game, and to make matters worse, it was still a winnable game in the fourth quarter despite his struggles. While the 2003 Pats had a great defense, if Peyton had played even average, Indy might have gone to the Super Bowl and the world would be a better place. Joe Montana, 1987 divisional round. Joe Montana is viewed by many as the second best quarterback of all time with an impeccable clutch reputation. While his 4 Super Bowl wins and 3 Super Bowl MVPs show he was indeed a big game player, even big game players have bad days. And Montana's 1987 playoff showing versus Minnesota is a great example. San Fran was heavily favored to win, but Montana was so bad he got benched in the second half for Steve Young in a brutal 12-point loss. Drew Brees, 2020 divisional round. I feel like I've talked about this game already in about 4 other videos, but it's not my fault Brees was so bad. This was by far the worst playoff game of Brees' career statistically, and it just had to benefit Tom Brady. Brees threw 3 interceptions and had a 38.1 rating. He threw 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter with the game in the balance and consistently set up Brady with short fields. He retired in shame following the game. Dan Marino, 1997 wildcard game. I seriously considered putting Marino's final game where he got beat 62-7 by Jacksonville here, but I chose his 1997 wildcard game against New England because it was actually winnable. Marino was terrible. He threw 2 interceptions, had a 29.3 rating, took 4 sacks, and led his team to just 3 points. But the cherry on top of this shit Sunday was that his defense only gave up 10 points. The other 7 were a result of a terrible pick 6 he threw. Laces out, Dan. Brett Favre, 2001 divisional round. This is the infamous game where Favre threw 6 interceptions, which even by Favre's standards is inexcusable. To make matters worse, 3 of those 6 interceptions were returned for touchdowns. If not for a garbage time touchdown late, Favre would have had 1 touchdown to 6 interceptions and even worse efficiency stats. Overall, Green Bay had 8 turnovers in this brutal 28-point loss. John Elway, Super Bowl 24. Elway's Broncos team was clearly inferior to the 49ers in the Super Bowl, which isn't shocking as the '89 49ers are probably the best team of all time. But that still doesn't excuse how terrible Elway was. He completed just 10 passes, had no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions for a disgusting 19.4 rating. He did run for a touchdown, which made the final score 55-10 instead of 55-3. Congrats, I guess? Steve Young, 1995 divisional round. Young's playoff career outside of 1994 is very shaky. While many were looking forward to another Dallas-San Fran NFC Championship game matchup in 95, San Francisco failed to get there thanks to this 10-point loss to the Packers at home. Young threw an incredible 65 times, but wasn't very efficient with those attempts. He did run for 77 yards in the touchdown, but he threw for 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions while also losing a fumble. Montana would never. Johnny Unitas, 1964 NFL Championship game. We have to go way back for this one. Unitas was the first real superstar quarterback in NFL history, and he absolutely played a pivotal role in the league growing into what it is today. But he also had some terrible playoff games, none worse than the 1964 NFL Championship game where he lost 27-0 to Cleveland. He threw for just 95 yards, 2 interceptions, and a 32.3 rating. He's fortunate Twitter wasn't around back then. Ben Roethlisberger, Super Bowl 40. I just want to reiterate how classy Ben Roethlisberger is. He's a goddamn stud. Anyway, he's the first guy in this video whose worst performance came in a win. He completed just 9 passes and threw 2 interceptions for a 22.6 rating in Super Bowl 40, but he did have a controversial rushing touchdown, and his team did enough to cover up for his ineffectiveness to win 21-10. It's so nice to see good things happen to good people. Phillip Rivers, 2007 AFC Championship game. Rivers had a torn ACL in this game, and he deserves to be commended for his toughness. Unfortunately, that doesn't change the fact that he sucked massively in a game which was extremely winnable, as his defense picked off Tom Brady 3 times. Rivers failed to lead San Diego into the end zone and finished with 2 interceptions for a 46.1 rating. Had he turned a couple of those long field goal drives into touchdowns, San Diego would have been in the Super Bowl. Eli Manning, 2005 wildcard game. Eli Manning has a clutch reputation thanks to his 2 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs over the Patriots, but he also had several terrible playoff showings, none worse than his playoff debut in 2005. Not only was he shut out, and not only did he throw 3 interceptions and commit 4 turnovers overall, but he never ran a single offensive play inside his opponent's 38-yard line. I have no idea how this bastard won 2 rings. Tony Romo, 2009 divisional round. Romo's playoff struggles were well documented throughout his career, and although his 2007 loss to the Giants might have been the worst choke job he suffered, his 2009 outing versus the Vikings is his overall worst performance. He led his team to just 3 points while taking 6 sacks. He also threw an interception and lost 2 fumbles. The Cowboys were blown out by 31 points. Hilarious! Kurt Warner, 1999 NFC Championship game. Warner only made the postseason 5 times, but he's still one of the best playoff quarterbacks in history, which makes it odd that his worst games save statistically came in a win over Tampa in the 1999 NFC Championship game. His historic offense scored just 9 points, and he threw 3 interceptions for a 56.2 rating. He did throw a clutch game-winning touchdown in the fourth, but he was bailed out big time by his defense in this 11-6 win. Roger Staubach, 1973 NFC Championship game. Staubach is one of the most well-liked and respected superstars in sports history, but he had some truly bad playoff sninkers on his resume that he's lucky didn't happen in the social media era, such as the 1973 NFC Championship game versus Minnesota. Despite being at home, Staubach threw for just 89 yards, 4 interceptions, and a 19.8 passer rating. He led his offense to just 3 points in a 17-point home loss. Respect the troops though. Jim Kelly, Super Bowl 26. We all know Jim Kelly and the Bills lost 4 Super Bowls, but in my opinion, his worst performance in any of them, and in his playoff career overall, came in Super Bowl 26 versus Washington. He threw 4 interceptions and lost 2 fumbles in a game that wasn't nearly as close as the final score would suggest. He threw 2 garbage time touchdowns, or else his already dreadful 44.4 rating would have been even worse. He also took 5 sacks and had a negative 8-yard catch for shits and giggles. Warren Moon, 1988 divisional round. Moon is a Hall of Fame quarterback who never even made a conference championship game appearance despite playing on some very talented Oilers teams. While Moon had some playoff losses that weren't his fault, losing a winnable game to Buffalo in 1988 has to hurt. Moon's defense gave up just 17 points, but his offense didn't show up, only putting up 10 points. Moon had an interception and 2 fumbles for a 62.7 rating. Troy Aikman, 1998 wildcard game. The first half of Aikman's career was magical. He won 3 Super Bowls and a Super Bowl MVP while putting up all-time elite playoff numbers. But after 1995, his playoff career was dreadful, and the low point came in this 1998 loss to the lowly Cardinals at home. Aikman threw 3 interceptions, had a dreadful 37.0 passer rating, and would have been shut out if not for a garbage time touchdown late in the fourth in this embarrassing 20-7 loss. Terry Bradshaw, 1977 divisional round. Bradshaw won 4 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs. He's one of the better playoff quarterbacks of all time despite pretty average stats in the regular season, but he still had his awful playoff showings, such as this 1977 game versus Denver. Not only were his stats awful, he threw 3 interceptions and had a 40.0 rating, the worst part was several of his turnovers came in the fourth when the game was still winnable. And finally, Dan Fouts, 1979 divisional round. Fouts played in just 7 playoff games in his Hall of Fame career. Fun fact, in both his first and last playoff game, he threw 5 interceptions. His last game was a blowout, but his first game in 1979 was still extremely winnable, which is why he gets the nod here. Despite his 5 interceptions, San Diego lost by just 3 points, and Fouts' normally suspect defense allowed just 17 points to a Houston team that was without Hall of Fame running back Earl Campbell. Tough scene.